to move next and discuss airside operations and the impact of 2020 on airside operations. So Jan Willem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Piotr. And here I will also come back to your question, Yusuf. How do you think machine learning and artificial intelligence can help aviation to prevent losses from another pandemic in the future? I think that's actually one of the key questions everyone should ask himself or herself that is working in an airline or airport. Maybe not so much about specifically machine learning and artificial intelligence, but in general, how can we use modern tech or state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art ideas that come out also of other industries in order to really make the industry more resilient. And I called it Airside Ops 4.0 required on road to recovery. So what do we know as a fact has happened in 2020? So we lost highly trained and experienced staff on the apron in the terminal, but I'm right now looking at airside operations, so on the apron, with the ground handlers, with the airports, with every kind of stakeholder. Natalie already touched on this a bit earlier, and she said that she heard from pilots that actually went to a different industry because they didn't see a future in aviation. And the same will happen with this staff, oftentimes not only working one job, but several jobs. So for them, it's not possible to wait for a year or two to regain or to re-enter into the industry. So that means that if we are looking at a quick recovery, that will not be possible without technological support. So here, also going a little bit to the question, why should airlines and airports, like Sugandi, into your question, invest? In my opinion, there is no other possibility for them. 2020 was simply a year everyone had to kind of first understand what is happening. So there was the shock, the terror, and then there was kind of simply survive. But I guess that we will see 2021 as a bit of recovery from this. And in order to restart operations, they will need technology. Piotr, can you go back, please? The next point is, about the airside capacity. It's heavily reduced. So I spoke to a couple of airports. One of them told me that they actually closed down an entire terminal. Well, many airports closed down entire terminals, but what they actually did is they also did some construction there in order to have a COVID test facility in there. So we realized, and we did also a little bit of research in this direction, that there's actually an unintuitive truth that there will be a capacity bottleneck next year at many airports because flights will ramp up again. We've seen it in the summer period. We have seen it from EasyJet that over Christmas, and they saw that there were like 400, 500% bookings that went through the roof. So we will not be back at 100%, definitely not. We will probably not even be back at 90% on an industry-wide level. But we will have airports that were already very congested before that will very quickly reach a capacity constraint again, because they cannot rebuild or reopen terminal space or aircraft stands quickly enough. So there again, we will need technology to kind of make it possible for these airports and airlines to actually ramp up operations again. And then last but not least, and I think Rico, you touched on this, or Andreas, you touched on this earlier, many airports and airlines have tremendously high levels of debt accumulated during the crisis. So future financial recovery is only possible with a very low cost basis. And I think that goes a little bit also into the question that who asked it? Sorry, there was one question from the audience earlier regarding low cost basis and flexibility. and also how we can make sure that we are more resilient as an industry for future pandemics. And I think here, modern technology that is driven by artificial intelligence, that is driven by data in general, that is driven by automation, will in the future, especially for airports, but also for airlines and ground handlers, reduce the fixed cost that you have, that you cannot simply get rid of. It will make it easier to actually ramp up and close down operations again. It will make the predictability better, even in times where your historic information is no longer really applicable. At the same time, however, I also have to say that from a supplier perspective, I think this crisis also was some kind of a drive for innovation when it comes to commercial models, to pricing. Rico, you touched on this earlier. There will be a necessity from a supplier perspective to also be a little more flexible and to do a per use based pricing and not just say, okay, it's an upfront payment and then that's it. So I think here we see that in order to tackle the problems that have arisen this year, we need technology, especially the one that will help you to really manage a situation without any historic data to feed it. And that is normally what we do when we talk about artificial intelligence. Now that's a very wide focus. Machine learning, you also need historic information, but at least you can like always gather new information day by day and improve the system than solely relying on data from last year. Like many planning scenarios for aircraft stand planning or for capacity planning, for staff planning is done with kind of, okay, what did we do last summer? And okay, let's see how many more flights we have this summer. And then we come up with a new plan. And I think there, artificial intelligence and machine learning driven organizations will have a big improvement for the years to come.
Very nice. Thank you, Jan Willem. We can already see implementation of computer vision, artificial intelligence in many industries, and aviation also picked up. So yeah, they're implementing the systems successfully. Thank you. So now we'd like to move forward with the airside operations, and here Lee from UCHU Group. Lee, please, the floor is yours.
Well, I think we've touched on what a totally challenging and tough year this has been. Totally unprecedented is a word that I've heard far too often. And I guess the outcome of much of this has come from companies that are much leaner, and many will have lost a lot of staff. And we've talked about that, not just operational staff, but a lot of back office staff as well. And we're beginning to think about, well, how will the companies manage to provide the service once we start to see an increase in traffic numbers, and trying to sort of focus on what your staff numbers should be. It's really hard in this environment because we don't really know. You know, if you're talking about taking people off of furlough and trying to give people time to retrain and redo certification, is when's the best time to bring them back. And the other example as well, which is something that traditionally, when you have like unplanned operational events, like weather, system failures, industrial disputes, and so on, companies would be able to throw people at the problem. They would get some people from the back offices to help, and this may not be something that can happen in the future because the staff are just not there. So I mean, what are the options? Well, do we think that companies will just rehire all of the people that have been made redundant and have left the businesses in the future? We don't think so. We might also see more outsourcing, but that's not really innovation. We've been doing outsourcing for years, and sometimes it works well and sometimes less so. We also expect to see a fast forward in the adoption of robotics and autonomy as well. So, we've already seen remote control autonomous tugs being trialed. Well, we've also seen cleaning robots and automated PRM equipment. we'll see more of this happen because firstly, potentially is COVID safer, but it means less people are involved in some of those operations. We think the resource market has changed too. People might not want to return to the rigidity of a fixed shift and contracts as were, and maybe having spent 9 months working from home or on furlough, they're now beginning to think a bit more about work-life balance and perhaps look more favourably at a more flexible working model. Well, that's great for them if they can afford to do that, but it's not great for airlines and airports that are looking to have to rehire many people back at some point in the future. Now, we've talked about how we might recover from this. We've seen some airports doing airfield equipment sharing and in terminals, but there's a bit around, well, why can't we share people too? Many of the roles are repetitive and have similar skill requirements. Do they even need to be directly employed? Why can't skilled people provide their services to anyone who wants it in a flexible fashion? One of the challenges of that, obviously, is that you need to have the right tools to basically to onboard people, to allocate them to different tasks, to ensure that they've got regulatory and the training needs are satisfied, and to ensure that they actually have the ability to carry out the tasks being put forward to them. And the companies are also going to need to have confidence that resource levels will be met and that they'll be able to meet their service levels. So we need to create, there needs to be a set of tools that create a new collaboration model across physical and virtual hybrid teams. There was a point made by something around how can you get top-down buy-in for this. One of the problems we see with IT is it's often written by engineers for engineers, and you give it to a C-level exec and they just look at this and go, I don't really understand this. And we need to focus on how we can make sure the right people see the right data which is relevant to running the operation. To summarise, I think we know that companies will still need a core level of staff in the future which are directly employed, but we'll start to see, and we think we'll start to see more sharing and more automation around the allocation of assets. And we think that'll become commonplace, as well as remote working, and not just back office remote working, but operational. We touched on an APOC and why have a massive an APOC? Why don't we have a virtual one? And then that touches a little bit on the environmental impact and reducing CO2. And it will also allow companies to hire the best resources for wherever they may be, and to give us flexibility that for whatever the future throws at the industry for the next 12 months, which is tough. And these challenges don't just apply to the airside environment, landside operations, retail, terminal, are all applicable.
Nice. Thanks, Leah. I guess there's one interesting question from Wahid that goes into your direction as well. We are talking about innovations that are a must for airlines, and I would extend it to airports as well. What concrete innovations do airlines need to survive or come out stronger than before? Digitization, what and where, and probably also how quickly? Lee?
Lee, you're on mute.
Sorry, I lost you for a second there. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, so the question from Wahid. We are talking about innovations that are a must for airlines. What concrete innovations do airlines need to survive or come out stronger than before?
And that's a really interesting question, because actually airlines are part of an ecosystem of multiple operators. They outsource a lot of their operations now to people that handle the desks, people that handle the bags, people that work out on the airfield. So one of the things that you traditionally see in IT is a very siloed model. And we have to have something which enables everyone to work in a super seamless way. And I think that is something that doesn't really exist well today. I think you can still see people walking around with clipboards on the apron and in terminals. And I think if parties can't do that, then the new operating models are not going to work very slickly.
All right, Jan Willem, do you have anything to add?
No, not from my side. Thanks.
All right, there is one question for you. So how quickly innovation will have to come in order to mitigate the problems that we have due to pandemic? What do you think?
That's a good question, and I think it goes back to the points that were raised earlier also by Daniel and by some of our other panelists. I guess the best point would have been in June, July this year, because we are all aware that you need to kind of plan a project. There is procurement included, contract management, and so on. Then you have implementation periods. What I want to say is that this time is already gone. Like airports and airlines missed a very, very good opportunity to really lay down the foundation for the future. And that also brings me to my question. It's ASAP. Again, we are not speaking about an airport getting in touch with any kind of IT supplier or in general supplier to improve their operations, and then signing an agreement tomorrow and spending $2 million by next week. We are talking about having the next 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 months, probably even the next year, discussing project management and so on and so forth. So it's not that we are talking about money that needs to be spent right now. The problem is that most of these companies have budgeting cycles that simply don't allow for quick decision making in that area.
Right, absolutely.